Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. I am doing a weird kind of project for me. I'm reading a bunch of books from a genre I'm not really sure I like, but I want to understand if I don't like or do like the romance genre, why am I not attracted to it? Why am I attracted to it? If there are certain genres within the romance genre that I enjoy. I also think that it is important to read romance to understand the most popular genre we have, both socially but also in general when it comes to book reading. Not because I want to make fun of people who read romance. I mean, I can just go on here, say romance suck, and probably get a lot of 1,000 people who agree with that statement. But I want to understand, even if I don't feel like that is the genres I enjoy reading or the books I enjoy reading. So I made a list of about 50 books that I wanted to read. 32 of them were different subgenres of romance, one for each that I could find, with the exception of dark romance. In addition, I searched on Storygraph for the books that I have in my own shelf that is classified as a romance. And I also have 10 wildcards that I read. Now, one of the things that I realized when starting to read more and more of the romance books on my shelf is that I have certain understanding of what romance is. Now, if you ask the general public what is romance, they will very often give you two criteria, and they are from the American Romance Writing Association, and they are, it needs to center on a romantic plot or a love story, and two, it needs to have a happy ending. So I did have that as criteria for when creating my list. But reading these books, and I have now read, I think, 26 or 27 out of the 50 books, is that number one, these books are very clearly wish fulfillment. Now, wish fulfillment is a coin termed by Freud, which is talking about daydreaming. And the daydreaming is when the societal expectations meet our inner desires, and then we create a bubble where they can sort of coexist without any problems. So when starting to reading more and more of these books, I did have in the back of my head when I'm trying to read them and understanding them and analyzing them, well, what is the wish fulfillment in these books? So that's one thing. And the second thing is that romance, with the exceptions of the one I had in my shelf, was very heavily female dominated. I think just one of the books that came from the wild cards or anything like that was The Last Summer in the City by Gianfranco Cagliarec, and Foe. So those two were sort of the two only books by male authors. And when I started reading the romance, I started to feel like a lot of these books were very feminine. And what I mean with feminine is that they were very focused on what Freud would have called the female phallus. So Freud has this theory about the phallus, and what he is talking about in this case is that you either are the phallus or you have the phallus. You either have power or you have power over the people with power. And that is one of the things that I sort of became interesting in when reading all of these books, because they were very focused on the female aspect of it. That means having the power over the people with power. So it's not unusual in romance books that the male interest is someone who is within the text clearly has more status and or more power than the female part of the love aspect. This is of course within the heterosexual couples. Within the love story, they are equal in the sense that they have rapport, they are arguing back and forth. So they are equal within the power dynamic between the two of them. But within the text in itself, you very often then get a love partner that is richer, that is smarter, that is more powerful in some way, and who is also then drawn to this more bland female partner because she is so magical in some way. And even in the books where the structure of the story sort of says that the women should be the ones with more power than the men, the narrative still turns it around and makes the men more powerful than the women, again, within the structure of the story. So, for example, in The Kiss quoted by Helen Huang, even if the woman is the one who is rich, she also has autism, which means that she doesn't understand society around her and therefore needs someone with more power than her, that is a male partner who doesn't have autism and therefore does understand the world around her, as a way of mediating and helping her in this situation. And the same thing regarding My Fake Rake by Eva Lee, where the woman is someone who has a higher social status than the man, who is richer than the man, is, because it is an historical romance, is placed in a time where, as a woman, she is powerless because she's a woman. So the man has more power than her automatically because he's a man. And all of these stories are then about the women's introduction to these men and how they gain power over these men. So that was one of the sort of working theories that I had and wanted to sort of check by reading more romance books written by men to see if there was something about that within the romance genre, that this is one of the things that sort of defined romance genre. So one of the things that I then realized reading these books was that I then, first off, I had to have more books written by men. So I went out and asked a bunch of romance readers Do you have any books that you will recommend written by men within the romance genre? The first thing I noticed is the majority of the books I was recommended were queer men writing books with a queer male relationship. That's fine, and I'm not talking down on that, even if I was mostly interested in it within a heterosexual aspect to check out this male-female dynamic. But just the fact that the majority of these authors are queer men, and queer men within queer theory are people who very often balance this masculine feminine aspect of society, is in and of itself interesting. But I did get 3 books that were recommended. Flowers for the Devil by Vlad Kahani, No One But You by Lee Greenwood, and Dangers in Maui by R. Barry Flowers. So in addition to the books that I had on my list, which was mainly books on my bookshelf, and I also read these 3 to sort of figure out the masculine view on this genre. And I learned 2 things on it. Number 1, I had Googled Storygraph for romance genre, and there needs to be, I don't know if there needs to be, because I don't think there necessarily needs to be anything, but a lot of the books that were on my shelf that I was told fit within the romance genre would actually fit more within love stories, and that we do then have 2 different genres with the love story genre and the romance genre. And again, that maybe that also points to something being here, and I'm trying to get a hold of what this actually is. But I am going to now talk about and spoil Hotel at the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford to try to explain what I mean with it. So the Hotel on the Corner of the Bitter and Sweet is about a man who, there is a parallel story, so I'm going to spoil this one. I'm very, very sorry, but I need to spoil it to explain it. He is Chinese American, and he talks, there is a parallel story between the 80s and the 40s, and this man thinking back from the present time in the 80s to the middle of the 40s, 1942, where this Chinese American man was interested romantically in a girl called Kaiko, who was American Japanese. In 1942 is when the American Japanese were sent to internment camp, because the US was at war with Japan, and therefore all Japanese Americans were considered the enemy. So this book absolutely centers around a love story. So this 2-part criteria of love story and happy ending is present. And what happens within this book is, I would argue that there is a happy ending at the end. Even if they lose contact over all of these years, they still get back into contact in the present day. And it's so, so wonderful. And they're so cute together. And that is a happy ending, even if it is probably a bit later than I what some readers would have enjoyed. At the same time, so this book will fulfill both of these criteria for a romance, but it's not a wish fulfillment story. It's not a story about my inner desires and the outer expectations meeting forces and me creating a way for them to coexist. This book is a reflection on the Japanese internment about being in love with the wrong person, about what then happens if you marry someone who isn't sort of your childhood sweetheart, and about what do children actually know about their parents, especially when it comes to minority children and their minority parents. That a lot of minority children grow up feeling more expectations from their parents than maybe their parents wanted to do or wanted to present, simply in the fact but just being minorities. So there is no sort of wish fulfillment, and that's why I feel like this isn't a romance story. It's a love story. But that's just my theory. That's just my reading of it, that in my head, these two ways of telling stories, where a love story, while this does have a happy ending, doesn't necessarily need to have a happy ending, that it's a love story is about a reflection of love instead of a wish fulfillment, that these then there are different genres and should be treated as different genres. But I really want to then know what you think about it. Do you think that we also should separate these two ways of thinking about the romance or love genre? And if then they should be, are we then now getting closer to that the genre romance is more than just the expectation of love story and happy ending? The reason why I also find it interesting is because of this book. It's Victoria by Knut Hamsun. This book is from the late 1800s. And I'm going to spoil this book as well. I'm very sorry. It's hard to talk about this project, about reading the romance genre, without spoiling all of these books, because such a huge part of the romance genre is this happy ending or not. Because this book is also about the love story, but it doesn't have a happy ending in the same way, the way we understand happy ending. The readers in the late 1800s would say that this is a happy ending. It's about a young man who falls in love with an upper class girl, and the upper class girl falls in love with him, but they can't have each other because there is a class difference, and then she ends up getting sick and she dies. And 1800 people from the 1800s would say absolutely a happy ending, because she was pure. The love became pure. It was never tainted by the fact that she would have to have married someone else. But today we would say that is absolutely not a happy ending. This is a wish fulfillment. It's about a man who is working class, who can imagine the fact that he could get someone who is upper class to fall in love with him. How powerful wouldn't that be? So this is a male fantasy romance from the 1800s. So I wouldn't say that this was a part of the romance genre today, but it is extremely different kind of book than this one. This is about the love story, about reflecting around the love story. This is about the wish fulfillment regarding the love story, about imagining a world where the expectations of society, rich women marry rich men, can coexist with the desires of the individual. I am more powerful than the societal expectations that rich women have to marry rich. She falls in love with me, a working class man. I mean, you cannot marry because that was unheard of in the late 1800s. So she has to die. But the love is there for us because she dies. So that's also why why I feel like there should be this different, that there should be this way of understanding what romance is and isn't. And I really want to know what other people think about this way of understanding it. And this leads me also to, so romance about being about the wish fulfillment. So what more can we sort of fish out of this genre by focusing on the books written by men? Well, that maybe there is something there regarding the female phallus, going back to Freud's theory about women. Wish fulfillment is about having power over the people in power. What's interesting with Lee Greenwood, No One But You, and R. Barry Flowers, Danger in Maui, is that these two books are two of the very, very few books and romance books that I've read where there isn't a difference between the characters in regard to power and the setting of the story. No One But You is about a woman who owns land and has to have a man help her because a man is a man. But she is not in any sense more or less powerful than him. More even is this sort of revealed in Dangers in Maui, where the characters are, it's basically an action film with just a larger romance plot. So I would absolutely say that No One But You and Dangers in Maui are wish fulfillment, and our wish fulfillment centered around the romance, and therefore should be called romance books. I'm not saying that these aren't romance books, but I think that by looking at these examples that differ from the majority of the books I've read, we more clearly see how one of the aspects of the wish fulfillment is this desire to have power over someone with power. And Flowers for the Devil is a good example of a book that fits into that category. Written by a man about a woman who is in the upper class, is an immigrant, and falls in with the love triangle with men who are more powerful than her in various different ways, and how her wish fulfillment, or the book, allows for a space where you as the reader can imagine you are this female person who have power over men with power. So that's my hypothesis, that romance genre, sort of digging out what this is, differs from love stories. So it's not just about a love story. It has to be something specific with regard to the love story, that it is a wish fulfillment, and that a lot of the romance books, not all of them, because you will never find a category that fits neatly for all the both books, but a lot of the romance genre is about the wish fulfillment, about having power over the people with power. And if you like romance, please let me know if you think that I am onto something or if I am missing something very important here. I'm reading to learn, and I'm screaming out because I want to listen. And thank you for listening to me screaming into